Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha Bruton-Hunter, and I work in the Policy Office at the National Science Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the Fall 2023 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. I'm pleased to present this session, which will cover the programs in the social, behavioral, and economic sciences. This session will be presented by Dr. Naomi Hall Byers.
My name is Naomi Hall Byers, and I am a program director in the Social and Economic Sciences Division of the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate at the NSF. I've been at NSF for a little over 2 years. My entree into the NSF came as a rotating program officer in the Law and Science program, and I came in 2021. And so my home institution was Winston-Salem State University, which is an HBCU in the University of North Carolina system. And I was a professor of psychological sciences. And so earlier this year, or actually a couple of months ago, I transitioned into a permanent position with the NSF. And so my background is that I'm a social/health psychologist by training. And so today I have the pleasure of talking a little bit about my directorate and some of our programs that you might be interested in. So as you may or may not know, the NSF comprises 8 directorates. Our newest directorate, which is down at the bottom, we call it TIP. It's Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. But the other divisions, Biological Sciences, Computer and Information Sciences and Engineering, STEM Education, Engineering, Geosciences, Mathematical and Physical Sciences, and then my division, Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. In addition, there are 2 main offices that I wanted to just mention, both the Office of Integrative Activities and the Office of International Science and Engineering are within the Office of the Director. And so these particular offices within the Office of the Director are also responsible for agency management, operations, and strategic planning in support of NSF's mission to advance innovation anywhere and opportunities everywhere. So today I'm going to talk a little bit more, as I mentioned, about the SBE. We're the government, we love acronyms, the SBE Directorate. So SBE supports basic research on people and society. SBE sciences explore cognition, human behavior, psychological sciences, and social organizations. And so the goal is to promote the progress of science by developing and employing rigorous methods to discover fundamental principles of human behavior and cognition at levels all the way from cells to society and across space and time. To talk a little bit about how our directorate is structured. So each of the 8 directorates in the NSF have what's called the Office of the Assistant Director. So the Assistant Director in each directorate is responsible for the entire directorate. And so in our directorate, we have Sylvia Butterfield, who is the Acting Assistant Director, and we have Evan Height, who is the Acting Deputy Assistant Director. So we're one of the smaller divisions in the NSF. And so, one of the smaller directorates in the NSF. And so we have 3 divisions and 1 main office. So the first division is called the Division of Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences. And the division director is Joan Serrano. And the deputy division director is Antoinette Winkleprince. In the Division of Social and Economic Sciences, where I'm located, our acting division director is Alan Tompkins, and the acting deputy division director is Lee Walker. And then we have, a lot of people don't know that the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics is a division within SBE. And it is run by Imelda Rivers, who's the division director, and then Christina Fryman is the deputy division director. I'll talk a little bit more about NCSES, acronyms again, a little bit later. But the Division of Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences and the Division of Social and Economic Sciences, as well as the Office of Multidisciplinary Activities, are granting entities within the directorate. NCSES does not provide grants, but I'll talk a little bit more about what they do provide. And so then we have, as I mentioned, the Office of Multidisciplinary Activities. Under the leadership, we have all of the wonderful program directors and administrative staff that help organize, evaluate, and process and manage all of the awards and proposals that we receive. So this slide right here gives you just a kind of a visual representation of what we saw in fiscal year 2022. Fiscal year 2022 is the latest data that we have right now. And keep in mind the percentages, some of the numbers may be a little bit off if you're particular about that, because when we talk about the awards, we're not including things like supplements, conference awards, or dissertation awards. But the SBE investments reached a number of people and institutions. And this slide shows the range of those investments, where we see in fiscal year 2022, we provided $286 million in grants to over 5,500 people were supported, 770 awards, looking at 3,500 proposals. Now, this is just 3,500 proposals that were received in our directorate. We don't talk about necessarily the success rate of each particular program, but overall, the research grant success rate is about 15 to 25%. And that may differ in program, but that's the average for our directorate. And of these 5,500 people supported by these 770 awards, we see about 2,400 senior personnel, 400 other personnels. This can include like research technicians or lab technicians, over 200 postdoctoral associates, about 1,400 graduate students, and about 1,100 undergraduate students. And all of these were from about 500 different institutions. So in order to do this, we rely heavily on our colleagues to review proposals. So you can see we had 17,000 proposal reviews for 3,500 proposals, which, as I mentioned, resulted in 770 awards. So I'm going to just take this time to make a plug for reviewers. If you are interested in being a reviewer, either an ad hoc reviewer or to be part of one of our review panels, it's a good idea to contact the program or programs that you're interested in. Send your CV, have a conversation with the program directors about your interests, because we are always looking for reviewers to help with the growing number of proposals that we receive. And lastly, I'll just say 63% of federal funding for academic research in social and behavioral sciences were provided by the NSF in fiscal year 2022. So now I'm going to talk briefly about each of the three divisions. The first division is the Division of Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences, which we call BCS. Now, as I go through the divisions, if there are particular programs that are mentioned that pique your interest, please go to the program description webpage and read a little bit more about it. Contact the program directors to get more information. So BCS supports investigations within the psychological, linguistic, geographical, and anthropological sciences. And so BCS is sort of kind of pseudo grouped into three primary areas. You have all the way to the left side, you have kind of the psychological and linguistic sciences. And some of the programs that sort of fit into that category would be cognitive neuroscience, developmental sciences, which, by the way, does not just focus on children. It focuses on from birth through older adults, the entire lifespan. We have linguistics and dynamic language infrastructure. We have perception, action, and cognition, science of learning and augmented intelligence, and social psychology. Then we have what we consider to be sort of the geographic sciences. And there are two main programs that sort of fit into that area. And there's a program called HEGS, which stands for Human, Environment, and Geographical Sciences. And then we have another program called Human Networks and Data Science, and we call it HANDS. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about that program in just a moment. And then finally, we have our anthropological sciences. And so we have archaeology program, we have biological anthropology and cultural anthropology. And so you may notice that there is an asterisk by certain programs. And so these are programs that support what's considered doctoral dissertation research improvement grants. And so sometimes you'll see those written as DDRI or DDRIGs. And so these are funds that the NSF provides that are not usually available from the student's U.S. academic institution. And so these awards are not necessarily intended to provide tuition or stipends to students, but what they are used for would be cost or augmenting costs to conduct dissertation research and throughout the dissertation process. So now, while all programs don't have the asterisks and they may not support the DDRIs, all programs do encourage and support the inclusion of undergraduate and graduate students in your proposals. So each of these programs, as I mentioned, have program websites that are filled with tons of information that can be bookmarked or can be printed out. Each page you will go to for each program provides descriptions of what they fund, what proposal submission information, sort of deadlines or target dates, and information about active awards. And many of the program pages also provide a map of sort of some recent awards so you can get an idea of what has been funded. So I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about this HANDS program, so Human Networks and Data Science. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the difference between, program announcements and solicitations and descriptions. However, I do just want to note, when you see something that has NSF and then it has a 5-digit code afterwards, that's often a program solicitation. And so the HANDS program solicitation is NSF number 23-568. So the HANDS program supports research that enhances understanding of human behavior by leveraging data and network science research across a broad range of topics and areas. There are 2 tracks, both with budgetary maximums of $1.2 million. And so the first track is the HANDS infrastructure track. And so this track really looks at proposals that develop data resources, databases, software, and analytic methods. And then there's the second track, and it's the HANDS research track. And so this track is really focused on advancing theory or modeling in core SBE disciplines by the application of data and network science methods. And so the HANDS program, particularly the research track, often co-reviews and will co-fund projects with other SBE programs. And so this is really important because this has the ability to enhance and increase the potential within the basic science programs or the basic science disciplines of SBE by providing an opportunity to incorporate big data, data analytics, and other sort of network science into the research that benefits all of our communities. And if you're interested in the HANDS program or getting more information, I put the website here, or you can just do a search on the NSF site. All right, so the second division is the Division of Social and Economic Sciences, which is SES, and that's the division that I am currently housed in. And so SES invests in studies of how societies, organizations, and economies function, including how decisions are made, how institutions function, and how scientific and technological progress are pursued. And the programs within the SES area: accountable institutions and behavior, decision risk and management sciences, economics, law and science, methodology, measurement and statistics, security and preparedness, science of organizations, science and technology studies, science of science, and secure and trustworthy cyberspace, and then sociology. And so again, you'll see the programs with the asterisk support DDRI grants. And so one of the things that I do want to mention, in case there's someone who's interested in dissertation grants as it relates to the Law and Science program, is that Law and Science outsourced their dissertation awards now that they are administered by Arizona State. And the reason that I bring this up is because it's really important if you're interested in a program or you're interested in a mechanism to always go to the website and look, because we try really hard to make sure our websites, our web pages are updated and provide you with links or resources where you can get more information from that. So I'm going to talk about one of the programs in the SES division, which is called Security and Trustworthy Cyberspace, and we often call it SATC. Right. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to highlight it is because this program is a wonderful example of a cross-directorate program. Also, this program just received an updated solicitation, and you'll see that NSF number starts with a 24, and that's fiscal year 24. And so this was recently updated. So if you're interested in applying to the SATC or Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace program, please make sure you are taking a look at the latest program solicitation. So this program really deals with the fragility and the vulnerabilities of cyberspace. So we're living in a time now where everything is really in cyberspace, but some of the issues around privacy and security still are not known or not where they should be in terms of being further along in terms of the research and understanding how to secure this sort of cyberspace or this sort of virtual environment that we're all really participating in. And so to achieve a truly secure cyberspace, it requires, of course, addressing both challenging scientific and engineering problems involving many components of a system and vulnerabilities that stem from human behavior and choices. And so I mentioned that this is a cross-directorate program. And so the directorates that are really involved in this particular program and funding proposals from this program are the SBE Directorate, the computer, so SICE, Computer and Information Sciences, Engineering, the Education, the STEM Education Directorate, and MPS, which is the Mathematics and Physical Science Directorate. So I mentioned that we have an office. It's the Office of Multidisciplinary Activities. And this office really supports student and postdoctoral training in the SBE discipline and sciences. It also supports capacity building at minority serving institutions, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, and also the ethical conduct of scientific research. So there are 6 programs that fall under SMA. There's the Build and Broaden program. I'm going to talk about that. And then there's a newer program that was just launched earlier this year. Acronym is CRISES, and it's the Centers for Research and Innovation in Science, the Environment and Society. We have Ethical and Responsible Research. We have the SBE Research Experiences for Undergraduate Sites, the SBE Postdoctoral Research Fellowships, and then the Science of Broadening Participation. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the first 2 programs. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview of the last 4. So the Ethical and Responsible Research, we call it ER2, supports research on what constitutes and promotes responsible research conduct and how to instill that knowledge into researchers, practitioners, and educators across all career stages. The next program, we call it the REU, so the SBE Research Experiences for Undergraduate Sites. So each directorate at the NSF accepts REU proposals. If the focus of the REU proposal is within the social, behavioral, and economic sciences, you would submit it to our directorate. So an REU site should provide research opportunities with a coherent intellectual theme for students. And it can be based in a single discipline or academic department, or it can be interdisciplinary and include multiple departments. So if you're interested in hosting an REU site, I would encourage you to check out the website. There's tons of information, or reach out to the program director. And we have the postdoctoral research fellowships. So these are to encourage independence early in a fellow's research career by supporting their research and their training goals. And then we have science broadening participation. And so these awards are really to support research on expanding participation in major societal institutions, the workforce, and education to enable informed decisions and the design of effective programs that engage diverse groups and are inclusive. So I mentioned I was going to talk about the Build and Broaden program. The Build and Broaden program supports fundamental research in the SBE sciences by scholars at minority-serving institutions. And so MSIs include those institutions of higher education that serve a significant population of students from historically marginalized and or minoritized backgrounds. And so these can include HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges and universities, HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, TCUs, which are tribal colleges and universities, and of course, other institutions that enroll a significant percentage of underrepresented minority students as defined by the U.S. Department of Education. And so proposals for the Build and Broaden program can either be from a single PI based at an MSI, multiple investigators from one or more MSIs, or a principal investigator that is not at an MSI, but who is collaborating with PIs or co-PIs or senior personnel from MSIs. Because one of the primary goals of this particular program is to enhance research partnerships and capacity building for faculty and researchers at minority-serving institutions. And so if you're interested in the Build and Broaden program, I would strongly encourage you to check it out and make sure you're aware of the requirements. And then quickly, I'll mention the postdoctoral fellowships. They support, as I mentioned, supervised postdoctoral opportunities for growth and independence. And then there are 2 tracks. So there's fundamental research in the SBE sciences and broadening participation in the SBE sciences. So if you are a postdoctoral student, if you're going to be a postdoctoral student, or if you support postdoctoral students, this is an excellent program to check out and see if it will be a good fit for your work. So the third division is the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics, NCSES. NCSES, as I mentioned, is not a granting division like BCS and SES, but what it does is it collects data on the research enterprise, produces reports that are helpful for society, like science and engineering workforce, produces statistics and reports on higher education research and development and STEM education. And so it is one of the 13 principal federal statistical agencies that's overseen by the U.S. Chief Statistician within the White House Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. And so what they do is they provide statistical information that help to support research in certain areas, as well as helping us identify gaps in other areas. They deploy a number of different surveys, and I put some of the surveys and some of the reports here. If you have not looked at the NCSES webpage, I highly encourage you to do so. It is full of data and resources and really great information about the state of STEM in the United States. And one report that may be of great interest to you in your work is a recent report called Diversity in STEM, Women, Minorities, and Persons with Disabilities. And this report was released earlier this year by NCSES, and the link is on their webpage, and it is free to download. So now, sometimes PIs are interested in sort of the standing programs and they're not aware of the number of cross-directorate programs that a directorate may offer. And so I just decided to list a few here, because sometimes the cross-directorate programs are only active for a few years or for a few cycles, and then it goes away. This is not always the case, but it can be the case. And as I mentioned, these are a little different than the standing programs, because the standing programs often don't go away. And then there's institutional memory for these particular programs. But the cross-directorate programs are really programs, some may be housed in a particular directorate, but are supported by other directorates. And then there are some that don't necessarily have a particular home. It is definitely, or it is truly just sort of a cross-directorate sort of working group made up of a number of program officers in different programs across the foundation. I'm not going to talk about all of the programs, but I will highlight two of the programs here. And we have the crisis program, which I've mentioned previously. We have strengthening American infrastructure, incorporating human behavior and epidemiological models, integrative strategies for understanding neural and cognitive systems, dynamics of integrated socio-environmental systems, and accelerating research translation. So the first program I'm going to talk about is Crises, right? Centers for Research and Innovation in Science, Environment, and Society. And as you can look at the title and read the description, you can imagine that this cross-directorate program, although it's based in SBE directorate, has support from other directorates that would be interested in supporting this type of work, such as the Geo Directorate, Engineering Directorate, Biological Sciences Directorate, and the EDU, the STEM Education Directorate. So the crisis program seeks to build research capacity and infrastructure to address complex and compounding national and global crises whose solutions require a human-centered approach. There was recently a Dear Colleague letter released earlier this year for planning and conference grants. We do anticipate another opportunity for submissions, but we don't have concrete information as of yet. And toward the end of this presentation, I will talk a little bit about how you can stay updated on all the funding opportunities and announcements in our directorate. So the last cross-directorate program I'm going to talk about is DICES. So it's Dynamics of Integrated Socioeconomic Systems. And this particular cross-directorate program grew out of a previous program, and it sort of replaces that program, which was called the Dynamics of Coupled Natural and Human Systems program. Oftentimes, the cross-directorate initiatives have larger awards or larger budgets available because it's reviewed and funded by multiple programs and directorates. And you can see budget maximum for these particular awards is $1.6 million. And commonly funding projects are composed of interdisciplinary teams that focus on complex interactions. And interdisciplinary teams and multidisciplinary teams, you will see a lot for the cross-directorate programs. And it just sort of makes sense because you're looking at the focus of a variety of programs and directorates at the NSF. And so the more diverse and inclusive and interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary your teams are, the more complex problems and potential solutions can be created. And also, this particular program also funds research coordination networks. And research coordination networks are grants that are used to enhance collaborations across disciplines. It's not necessarily focused on research per se or research in and of itself. It really wants to support networks that foster communication and new collaborations among scientists, engineers, and educators who share a common interest in a new or developing area of science or engineering. So not only do we have cross-directorate programs, we have cross-agency programs. The first one has been around for a long time. This is Collaborative Research in Computational Neuroscience. And this is a program that is co-funded in a partnership between the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Engineering. And really, it's opportunities for parallel international funding. And so it really looks at the interrelationship between biological processes, modeling, implications for biological and engineered systems, as well as data sharing and how the neuroscience and so how the cognitive and the psychological sciences play a role in that. And so the programs or the directorates within the NSF that are interested or that participate in this particular program are SBE, SCIES, which is the Computer Directorate, Biological Sciences, NPS, Math and Physical Science, and then Engineering. The second, Smart Health and Biomedical Research in the Era of Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Data Science. You can see why sometimes we use a lot of acronyms. So this particular project is an interagency agreement between the National Science Foundation and NIH, and it supports the development of high-risk, high-reward approaches to pressing questions in the biomedical and public health communities. And you can see the same directorates are involved in that, with the exception of biological sciences. So I'm going to talk briefly about the kinds of awards or AKA mechanisms that are often funded within the SBE directorate. So I've talked already about doctoral dissertation, research improvement grants. Talk briefly about eagers. So you may have heard the term eagers and see that some programs are accepting eagers. So what is it? It really is a mechanism for high risk, high reward projects. So these are projects that maybe wouldn't necessarily do as well in a standard review panel because they might be a little bit risky, but high risk, high reward, really innovative ideas. I would encourage you to talk to the program directors in the program that you might be interested in submitting an eager to. Rapid rewards, rapid proposals are proposals that are for sort of time relevant proposals, I would say. Something that is happening now, something that needs to be looked at now. So for instance, a number of rapid proposals may be submitted after a natural disaster to study particular things, to study things around maybe migration, to study things around maybe decision and risk management and so forth. So rapid, think in terms of something that needs to be looked at, now. Conference awards, if your conference proposal is less than $50,000, it can be reviewed by the program directors and they can give you a decision. If it is over $50,001, it must be reviewed in a regular standard panel. I've already talked about the research coordination networks. And then the last three, we have career, mid-career advancement, and then research at primarily undergraduate institutions. So career awards are kind of the gold standard awards at NSF. These are for early investigators who have not received tenure yet, 5-year awards, innovative projects, that's something that this is to set off your research trajectory. And so if you're interested in career awards, please make sure you take a look at that. And then mid-career advancement awards are for faculty that are at the mid-career stage. So you are tenured, you are an associate professor. Usually you might be a tenured associate professor for a little while, but you need to be at that stage. And it really is to provide funds to do something different, either to research a different area, to learn something different. So if that sounds like you, check out the MCAs. And then there are funding mechanisms that are really for faculty who are just at institutions who primarily offer undergraduate degrees. Useful terms, you may have heard me talk about a Dear Colleague letter. And these are intended to provide general information to the community. They can clarify or amend an existing policy or document or inform the community about upcoming opportunities. Deadline versus target date versus target window. Sometimes this gets very confusing. Deadlines are dates for submission after which proposals will not be accepted, and they may be returned without review. A target date is a date after which proposals may still be accepted, although they may miss a particular panel or committee. And then a target window or a submission window are designated periods of time during which the proposals will be accepted. We have the difference between program solicitations and program announcements. So the term program solicitation refers to formal NSF publications that encourage the submission of proposals in a specific program or area of interest to the NSF. The term program announcement refers to publications that announce the programs and not necessarily a particular solicitation. So solicitations tend to be much more focused than program announcements. And then program descriptions are really the web pages of each of the programs within the NSF that give you more information about the program and what they fund. So how to find programs, there's a couple different ways. You can do a search for programs and past awards. You can do an award search to see what program funded a particular researcher or search award titles and abstracts by keywords. And one of the things that you can do, and I mentioned this earlier, is you can sign up or subscribe to NSF announcements and newsletters to get information on programs and their outreach efforts. So you just go and you would sign up for SBE programs, enter your information, and then every time a funding announcement is released or a funding opportunity is released, you will get an email. So I'm gonna quickly kind of go over the funding search tools that you can use. So if you go to the standard sort of NSF funding page opportunities, you see down here where it says the directorate, you want to select the Social Behavioral Economic Sciences Directorate, and what you will get is something that looks like this. It will provide you with all of the active and upcoming program solicitations or program announcements or DCLs. And so you see the highlighted, so for instance, the HANDS program. You see this is highlighted, you can click on that and it will give you a screen that looks very similar to this. It gives a description of the solicitation of the announcement or the program, provides you with due dates or target dates. It tells you who the program contacts are. So oftentimes you will have the program directors as well as an administrative contact. And then down at the bottom, it says browse projects funded by the program. You can click there and it will give you a list of recently funded projects in this particular program. Now, if you want to use the advanced search award, you will get a screen that looks very similar to this. You can search a number of ways. You can search by directorates, you can search by an institution, you can search by a particular NSF program, you can search by a program solicitation number. So there are a variety of ways that you can do that. So if you want to look at a particular funded program or use some keywords, you'll end up, whichever search you get, you'll get a screen that looks like this. Anything that's highlighted, you can click on and get more information. So you can see what has been funded. You can click on the titles and get the abstracts. And because most of this information is public knowledge, it will give you the PI, the co-PI's name, the funding amount, and an abstract. And so if you do decide to click on one of the abstracts, you will get a screen that looks like this. And so it has things that I mentioned, the title, it has the funding date, it has the award number, it has the program director information and contact information. There has start date, potential end date, award amount, whether it was co-funded, or not. So all of this information will be on the screen. So I'm going to start to wrap up a little bit by mentioning a few things. One of the things I want to mention is co-reviews. So what is a co-review? A co-review is when you submit one proposal and you as the PI can either request review by another or multiple programs, or sometimes you submit a proposal to a particular program and a program director reads the proposal and thinks that this may be a good co-review opportunity with another program. Now, there are some programs that do not accept co-reviews and they don't co-review with other programs. And so you have to inquire about that. But oftentimes co-reviews are accepted. Now, the possible outcome, both programs can decide to fund, which means they can split the funding. Neither program can decide to fund, or only one program can decide to fund. Now, sometimes I've heard people say, oh, if you request a co-review, you lessen your chances of being funded. That's not true. You actually increase your opportunities with other programs reading and perhaps deciding that they want to co-fund a part of that proposal as well. So before you apply, read. Every now and then, the PAPG, which is the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, is updated and announcements are sent out about that. But this is the policies and procedures for submitting, maintaining, post awards, all of those kinds of things. And so there are tons of FAQs in here. It can be searched, it can be downloaded as a PDF, and you can search terms, but it's very important to follow the PAPG when you're submitting your proposals, as well as if you were provided with an award, and to maintain your award. And so make sure that you are familiar with this, and or your Office of Sponsored Programs or Office of Sponsored Research is familiar. If you are interested in finding out if your particular proposal or idea is a good fit for a program, I suggest you contact the program directors for that particular program or for multiple programs if you think your area of interest may overlap. It's important to reach out to a program director by emailing them. It's very difficult to have these kinds of conversations with cold calls. So I would always suggest to email them a 1 or 2 page summary of your planned project. Make sure that you include the intellectual merit and broader impacts so that you can get feedback from the program director about the project fit in terms of the goals, and to see if they have any specific questions. Oftentimes they would be willing to set up a Zoom appointment or to invite you to their office hours, or if there are webinars for this particular program or solicitation, but starting out by email is the best way to go. Common pitfalls in proposals. Many of these I think are probably standard knowledge, but just to quickly kind of go over them. Overlooking key aspect of the program announcement and requirements. Proposals go through compliance checking before they are sent to the individual programs. If you don't meet the requirements or follow the announcement or follow the guidelines, sometimes your proposal can be returned without review. So make sure that you're following the guidelines. Relying on advice from people who only work with other directorates. So for instance, biological sciences reviews and processes proposals differently than the SBE directorate does. A lack of specificity about methods and or data analysis plan, unclear hypotheses or the relevance to theory, disconnect between framing, motivation, activity, failure to establish feasibility, not tailoring your proposal to the appropriate audience. So disciplinary versus multidisciplinary panels. Some programs are multidisciplinary programs. And so therefore, when you write, you can't just write in a single disciplinary context. You have to make it a little bit broader. And then finally, broader impacts. Why should the taxpayers care about your particular proposal, your particular idea? It's really important. And so, kind of keeping along with that, the NSF merit review criteria, most people are very familiar with intellectual merit, right? So it's what most investigators or researchers sort of understand inherently, right? What is the potential for advancing knowledge, qualifications, transformability, originality, access to resources, et cetera. However, broader impacts may be a little more fuzzy for some, but it's really important. And so promoting teaching, training, education, what is the broader impact of your project, right? Do you want to enhance the infrastructure? Are you utilizing or providing community resources and outreach? Are you including underrepresented groups? Are you training them? What are the benefits to society? And I just want to put up a screenshot of a DCL that was posted a couple of years ago that had information about broader impacts in the social, behavioral, and economic sciences. It is not exhaustive, but it does provide information about the importance of broader impacts and ways to measure it. So it's definitely a link that you should check out if you have questions about broader impacts or just to refresh your knowledge about it. So that is the end of my presentation. I may have gone a little bit fast, but we don't have a lot of time. So I do want to say thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to open up with any questions you may have. And how I think it would be best is when you start your question, if you kind of give me an idea of sort of who you are and what your role is. So are you a postdoctoral student? Are you a graduate student? Are you an undergraduate student? Are you a research administrator, a faculty in what area? And then, ask your question so that I can try as best as possible to tailor my answer to your particular question. And if at any point you have any need for follow-up correspondence, my email address, nhallby@nsf.gov, is available. And I thank you very much for your time.
Hello, okay, we're back now. Thank you so much for that, Naomi. I am happy to say we have lots of questions here that we will get to. So let's all get started with it. First one, what types of education research are found in SBE?
Great question. I think one of the things that happens a lot with our directorate is that there is quite a bit of overlap with the EDU director, which is the director for STEM education. So the general answer to this question is that it really depends on the outcomes of the research. So the EDU directorate funds activities aimed at improving knowledge about like accessibility, integration, evaluation, adaptability in STEM education and STEM careers. So if your focus is on student outcomes or curriculum development or student engagement in some type of way, it may be a better fit for EDU, but SBE programs focus really on sort of understanding the underlying mechanisms or behaviors, so much more basic research in these sciences. But I would just say, in general, the best thing to do is to contact a program officer in the program or the areas that you're interested in and speak with them about your project. And we can tell you if this is something for our program or our directorate, or if we think that that might be better in a different directorate. We try to review overviews for you and then have conversation to make sure that you're understanding where your project fits.
Okay, thank you. And do you need to have a grant prior to becoming a reviewer? Changing the subject a little.
So this will depend on program. There are some programs that like for their reviewers, particularly their panel reviewers, to have been funded PIs or funded co-PIs before. And then there are other programs that don't require that you've had a grant, because I think a lot of programs are sort of moving to this idea that bringing in new reviewers, whether that's ad hoc or panel reviewers into the NSF, whether or not they've had a grant, is a great opportunity, particularly if they're junior faculty or if they're faculty at institutions that are not Research One institutions, to sort of bring them into the NSF family, have them review, have them understand sort of what we look for in intellectual merit and broader impacts, so that they in turn have that information so that they will submit a grant and be successful in the future.
And it is, again, very important to reach out to the various programs to find out really what they prefer. You know, as she said, there are some that may have a preference for, you know, previously awarded, but plenty that will say, no, come one, come all, we need you because you benefit as well as NSF, you know, so there is something to gain from both sides. You know, NSF definitely benefits from the various reviewers, diversified portfolio.
Absolutely.
And I believe, and so also does the community, right?
Absolutely.
From it. Yeah. Okay. Another question. I'm a researcher working on complex systems, and I've worked with existing Twitter data from Chile and other countries for some years. I came up with a project that would use these data to develop and evaluate new types of opinion formation models that would adequately describe social network dynamics. I thought a natural target would be the HANDS research program, but not necessarily in connection to any other program. Is it possible to get permission to submit to core research HANDS-R? If so, how would I do it?
And so this is a great question. And my answer, I think, will be applicable to any additional questions about, I have this project, sort of, you know, do I need permission, or kind of what should I do? The first thing that you should do is contact a program officer in that particular area. I will tell you, HANDS-R, so when I talked about the HANDS program, there are two threads. There's an infrastructure thread. You have to have permission to submit to the infrastructure thread, which means that you've already spoken to the program officers and they've reviewed the overview of your project. You do not need permission to submit to the research thread. However, to ensure that it's a good fit for the HANDS project, I would encourage you to reach out to the program officers. What they'll usually ask for, like I mentioned in the slide, is like a 1 or 2 page overview. And then in many instances, they can give you feedback via email. And in some instances, they may schedule a call and speak with you a little bit more, but they'll let you know if this is a good project for our particular program, or they will encourage you to think about a different program.
Okay. Naomi, can you describe more how review operates with interagency funding, like the joint NIH-NSF calls?
Absolutely. So and I'll do this really quickly because I know we're running out of time. I think sometimes it will depend on the interagency relationship. So I'll just give you an example. So I was a program officer for 2 years in the law and science program. And so we had an interagency relationship with the National Institutes of Justice, or NIJ. And so sometimes we being the law and science program representing the NSF, would go to our contact at NIJ and say, we have this project. Is this something you might be interested in? In other instances, that there are already funds set aside for a particular cross-agency or interagency program, like if there's anyone on the call interested in forensics, we have an interagency relationship with the NSF, particularly law and science program, and NIJ around forensics. So oftentimes you may see that information in the opportunity or the solicitation, and sometimes you might not see it because it's internal in terms of the relationship. So it really just sort of depends, but you would only submit to one. So if this is the NSF's opportunity, you're just submitting to the NSF, and then the program officers are speaking with the program officers at the other agency about co-funding.
Okay. And broader impacts. Why should the taxpayer care? Individual has not seen that from ERIS, et cetera. So can you explain?
And I think that the next, I think they commented and said, oh, they see it in the slide that they had not really thought about it that way. But that is one of the ways that the NSF, which is, we're a government, we're a publicly funded entity. And so we have to always think about the taxpayers, and we also have to think about being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And so when you're thinking about broader impacts, one of the things that we want you to think about is sort of, why should people care? Why should other taxpayers be okay with their money or their tax dollars being utilized for this type of research? And so that's just one perspective of how you can think about your broader impact statements.
Okay. And one more question. On this slide on common pitfalls, it says that people rely on advice from people from other areas or old experiences. Curious as to why that would be a major problem rather than a useful resource.
So it can be a major resource, but as academia is consistently and constantly evolving, so are the opportunities within the NSF. And so sometimes you can have folks who may have been funded by the NSF for a long time or years ago, and they have one perspective. And when you look at the solicitation, we're really looking at something different. I think broader impacts is a fantastic example, because up until recently, I think when most people thought about the NSF and the review process, they thought about intellectual merit as being higher. And now we're coming to intellectual merit and broader impacts being more 50-50. And that is very different than how it used to be. And so if you're not thinking about sort of the opportunities and the mission and the priorities currently of the NSF, you can miss out on some really, really great programs and funding and opportunities.
Okay, with that, thank you, Naomi, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.